So I was doing some reflecting the other day, and I was thinking about where I was at when I joined the army as a 17-year-old straight out of high school. And I know somebody who about to join the army, and they're still fairly young. He's 18 years old. So we talked about it, and I thought I'd share a little bit of that discussion here. So this is going to be another talk about you know just whatever came to my mind. And I think there's two key things that people need to take into consideration when they join the military in general, especially as a young person straight out of high school. And I've heard no one else discuss these things, but the two key things I would say are one, the lack of previous life experience slash previous life achievements, and then two, I would say would be lack or how do I want to phrase this, being in a bubble. So there's the two things that I want to discuss. So the first thing is when I went through basic training and during my time in the service, going through a lot of these different schools and tribulations and stuff like that, I noticed that a lot of the younger people would often go into I want to say depression because that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I would say they would go into a deep sadness, and I went through that too when they would not succeed at a certain goal in the military, whatever that is, whether it be passing this course or getting that promotion or getting that deployment or whatever it is. I noticed a lot of people, again, specifically the younger demographic, would get really down on themselves. And I think a big reason for that is that when you join straight out of high school, you don't really have previous life victories to lean on in those moments of difficulty. So, for example, if you're going through some deployment and for whatever reason things aren't going well, you start to, people start to, and again, I went through this. I'm just gonna say people in general. People would go into a deep sadness when things wouldn't go their way because, if you didn't succeed in that particular environment, in that particular task, you start to think that you would never succeed in anything else. Oh, if I couldn't succeed here in the army or the military, I can't succeed at anything else. Like it's over. And I think it's important to understand that the military is not the end all be all in the sense that because maybe things didn't go as planned in the military, that's what's someone's destiny is to consistently fail at everything. I had this interesting conversation with this gentleman. This was like 6 months before I separated, but he was separating at the time. He was getting med boarded out. And if you guys don't know what med boarded means, this means when a soldier gets separated because, they get injured really badly and they just can't continue to do their jobs. And, he would often feel like a failure because he said, okay, I originally planned to do 20 years in the service and I'm getting out after only 2 years because of this injury. And I think it's important to understand that it's not the end all be all, and it's not just the military, it's with anything. Failing at one specific domain or one specific experience or chapter in your life doesn't determine someone's long-term trajectory in life. So that's the first thing. And the second thing I want to mention is um, the military shelters you quite a bit, kind of like a bird's nest. So one of the biggest issues with the military is that, especially if you join young, again, this is primarily who this video is aimed towards is younger people joining straight out of high school or maybe like a year or two after high school, that you get really sheltered in the military because you don't have to worry. And this is obviously it's a double-edged sword, right? You don't have to worry about healthcare. You don't have to worry about food on the table. You don't have to worry about having a place to sleep. You don't have to worry about getting paid. Like all of these things, you kind of take for granted as you spend more and more time in the military. And it's something that on the outside, in the real world, those aren't things that are just given to you. Like everything, nothing is free on the outside, or nothing is just given to you or guaranteed on the outside. And that's kind of one of the things that I think young people really need to take into consideration for when they get out, whether it be in 20 years or whether it be after 4 years after their initial contract, is understanding that the military does shelter you a bit. So to be ready for that change for when you do get out. Again, whether it be in 4 years or whether it be in 20 years, I was having trouble adapt to that change when I got out, and I'm still adapting to it little by little. And I've only been in for 6 years. That adapting to that change would be significantly harder if you did 20 years. And that's just one of the drawbacks that comes with the job. It's not necessarily a fault in and of the job itself, but it's a drawback that comes with it. And I think to mitigate that, I think it's really important as a service member, again, regardless of the branch, to have close civilian friends. That way, you're not too confined to that bubble that the military often has one in. So, when you have civilian friends, you're more likely to be up to date with what's going on the outside, as well as how civilian life really is. And especially for when you do get out, it'll be easier to transition out because you might have civilian friends who might be able to guide you through that process. So, like a good analogy I like to think of it is like a desk job. In a desk job, you have to sit for long periods of time, which is not good for your physical health. So to mitigate that, you want to, stand up every once in a while, stretch, go for walks to mitigate the downsides of that. And that's kind of what I'm saying here is to have civilian friends who you know well and that know you well so that you're not so confined to that bubble in the military. And then when you do get out, the transition isn't so drastic and it's trying to adapt to civilian life. So those are two considerations that I think need to be taken into account by any young person. By young person, I mean like 21 and under joining the military, is to be aware that one, the military or anything in general isn't end all be all. If you fail at one thing, doesn't mean, or not even fail, but like let's say things don't go exactly how you picture them to go, doesn't determine the trajectory of your life. And to be aware of the bubble that you're living in the military, so that you can be better prepared to transition out of that bubble for whenever you do get out. Because civilian life and military life are two very different environments, and it takes time to adjust to either one. But that's all I got for today. Just really want to get that off my chest because I thought that was an interesting conversation and something that I haven't heard really anyone touch on, both in my personal life and on the internet. So, yeah, that's all I got for that. Talk to you guys soon.